What a wonderful Sabbath, isn't it? Amen. I wish the children's story will continue and the special music will continue and we will listen to more and more. We began a series of sermons called The Parables of the End Time. And this series of sermons was based on a passage from the Bible. The passage is found in the Gospel of Luke in chapter 17, and it says, as it was in the days of Noah, so it will be also in the days of the Son of Man. They ate, they drank, they married wives, they were given in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark and the flood came and destroyed them all. Likewise, as it was in the days of Lot, they ate, they drank, they bought, they sold, they planted, they built. But on the day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. Even so, it will be in the day when the Son of Man is revealed. So Jesus takes two historical events. One is the days of Noah and the flood. And then he speaks about the days of Lot. And he tells us that as it was in those days, so it will be in the days of the second coming. So we developed this series called Parables of the End Time, the days of Noah, Genesis 6, the days of Lot, Genesis 18 and 19. And then we added the last days in Jerusalem. Each one of them has a very tangible connection with reality. When you pump gas in your car, you remember the days of Noah, because the whole oil industry and the plastic industry and everything else is based actually on oil products which are related to the organic material that have been gone through the carbonization process, and then we extract them from the ground and we process them, and they are part of our lives today, from the carpet you stepped on, maybe the shirt you wear, and so on and so forth. They are a reminder that there was a generation and a population thousands of years ago. They departed from God, and God had to intervene in history. We call them the flood. Then the days of Lot. If you ever go to Israel, or those who go to visit Israel, definitely you won't miss a visit to the Dead Sea, which is the lowest point on earth, and there is no explanation for it. People try to give this and that. It doesn't really work. They try to come with a theory or another. It was not a natural cataclysm because we can't explain it yet. We don't know what happened there. The only explanation is in the Bible. And if you visit Jerusalem too, you'll still find the Wailing Wall, where the Jewish people are still weeping and thinking of how Jerusalem was destroyed. And it connects with the words of Christ when he told them, I'll tell you the truth, this generation is not going to pass until all this will happen. So all these three historical events are used as an illustration for the times and the settings before the second coming of Christ. We don't go through them now. But then, in continuation, Matthew 25, Jesus tells us three stories. We call them parables. In the parable of the 10 virgins, the parable of the talents, and the parable of the sheep and the goats. Each one of them answering the question, what am I supposed to do to be ready? In the 10 virgins, the message was, being ready, hold up the light, keep on shining in the darkness of life, in the darkness of the world. The parable of the talents, be faithful with the talents that have been given to you. And the last one is the sheep and the goats. I think there is an interesting progression in this, because the virgins were family members, they're very close to the bride. But then you have the servants. They are part of the house, but they're not necessarily part of the family, but they are still in the house. And then at the farthest end of this circle, you have the sheep and the goats. And there's an interesting process in the way Jesus approaches all this, because I believe the way God is going to deal with human beings, it's going to be the same. Some people, the virgins, very privileged. the closest. It's me and it's you probably. Then you have others, the servants. They are not that close, but they still have been given much. And then you have those who are somewhere farther away. They know very little about God, and they don't know much theology. But one day Jesus will welcome them in his kingdom, and today we'll see why. So the parable of the sheep and the goats, as it's called. And we will go through it, through most of the passages. So if you have a Bible, you can open and read with me. We'll follow some of the passages on the screen. Matthew 25, beginning verse 31. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the holy angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. Interesting, because Jesus begins the parable in a different setting, and he speaks about him coming in his glory. And Jesus was the Son of Man for 33 years. Then he went to heaven, and in heaven he became our lawyer or advocate for about 2,000 years. But there's a time when he says, as a lawyer, as an advocate, my time is over. Now I'm becoming the judge and the king. And in Matthew 25, he begins from that moment. And speaking about talents, there is a Seventh-day Adventist artist. His name is Nathan Green. And he did this beautiful painting representing the second coming of Christ. And fortunately, in this painting, all you see just the sheep. You don't see the goats in this painting, right? Do you understand what I'm saying? In this painting, you don't see the destiny of those who won't rejoice at the second coming. You see only those who are very happy to see Christ coming. And Christ, again, comes here as a king to take back home those who love him and those who are with him. And I try to imagine the artist spending time and imagining how Christ will come and what would happen at his coming. And I think he had great ideas. You see parents here receiving their daughter. Here some parents receiving back their baby coming out of the grave, and the angels bringing from the grave people, and also people from different cultures and generations being mixed together at the second coming of Christ. Beautiful painting. I wish I could buy one. I was looking, how much does it cost? It depends on the size. And I'm not telling you the cost, the price, but we bought one of his paintings, small size, for a certain event in our family life. So Jesus presents himself in this parable as being the king and the judge. And then he says all the nations will be gathered before him. In 2 Corinthians 5:10, the Bible says, for we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that each one may receive the things done in the body according to what he has done, whether good or bad. The thought of judgment is not too often discussed. We don't, most of us don't even want to think about it. But the Bible tells us that at the end of human history, there's an event, and the event is called the judgment. And in this judgment, everybody has to appear. We just moved here in the county, in Lake County, and 4 months after that, I got a note in the mail that I have to be one of the juries. And even my neighbor says, how did this happen? You just moved here. I said, I don't know. And I said, I wish I can avoid that. But I went there, and it was an interesting experience. I was the whole day in court. And I think I mentioned once that I was looking at the man who was accused. How do we call him? The defendant? And I don't know if the accusations were true or not, but I have to tell you that I was so sorry for him. I was just so sorry for him. And the whole process there, the judge there, the juries and the lawyers, and the prosecutor and this and that. The whole scene, I said, well, I hope I'm not going to end up here soon. So the Bible speaks about Jesus Christ coming, and at his coming, everybody is not invited, everybody is summoned. You have to go. It continues, and then he says, he will separate from one another. Interesting observation. All three parables end with a separation. The parable of the virgins, the foolish and the wise. The parable of the servants, the faithful and the unfaithful. The parable of the sheep and the goats, the sheep and the goats. In all parables, Jesus speaks about the separation. So that's an interesting element. The point is, we have a song, and we see the song, when we all go to heaven. Well, the song is nice, but it's not theologically correct. We are not all going to heaven. Or, I mean, at least I hope we will go all to heaven. But it's, I'm sorry. But it's not the whole way. I mean, you go to these funerals, and I have never heard the preacher or a priest saying, I'm sorry to tell you, our brother is burning in hell. They never say that. They always say, well, we are happy, the sister or the brother or the father, he's rejoicing in heaven, which obviously I don't believe that is not true. But everybody portrays, this romantic experience, salvation. Well, Jesus has something else to say. He speaks about the separation at the end. And by the way, talking about the separation that happens at the end, some of you, is there anybody here that, have you read or watched one of these Tim LaHaye's movies or books about Left Behind series? Anybody? Anybody other than me? Nobody? You've never seen that? Okay, a few of us. So if you don't know who this is, well, actually he's very well known in the Christian culture of the West. I don't remember the years, maybe 70s or 80s. He began to read, he read the first book, which was Left Behind. And the concept is that, he wrote then many other books. And they made movies out of his books. And it became very known in the evangelical world, and people will watch them. He wrote actually a novel. He wrote a series of novels. He never pretended that he teaches the biblical truth. But it's very interesting that his novels got so much traction in the theology of the evangelicals today that people believe this is true. And what actually they believe and teach, they call what's called the rapture concept, the rapture and the second coming. And it's very strongly ingrained in the beliefs of the evangelical Christians today. The belief is, as you see, people take this prophecy of 7 years from Daniel, and they placed it right at the end of time, and they believe that at one point there will be what's called the rapture of the church, meaning the faithful ones will be taken from the earth in a very secret way, and they'll just disappear from the earth. And then comes the tribulation, the 7 years of tribulation, and then with the rise of Antichrist in Jerusalem and the rebuilding of the temple. And they have an interesting theology, which I do not subscribe to it. Seventh-day Adventists have a different understanding and interpretation of the biblical prophecies. But you'll be surprised how strongly this is ingrained in the theology and the beliefs of the people. Guess what? Believed on Christian novels. Tim LaHaye was the main promoter of these ideas. And people read the novels, one novel after another, and they actually believe that that's what the Bible says. If you read the Bible, the separation happens when Christ comes, not before that. So the actual belief is that people in planes, I have to say, out of curiosity, I watch a movie, or I think one or two, I don't remember, where the pilot is in the plane and the plane is flying, and suddenly people disappear out of the plane. Boom, 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 they are gone. And one of the stewardesses is gone, and you see people driving their trucks and they disappear. The driver is gone from the truck, and then the truck ends up hitting a building and in a home. The baby is gone from sleeping with his mother. So they believe that those who are good and faithful to God, at one point they will just disappear. They'll be raptured and taken to heaven basically in a secret way at an unknown date. Well, the Bible doesn't teach that. The Bible says that the separation happens at the end of time. The second coming of Christ is when that happens. Thought of mentioning that if you really want to read a good set of books, in my opinion, and my opinion is strong, after the Bible, this is the best set of books you can read. Amen. So, after the Bible, the best set of books you can read is this. It's a series that approaches the whole Bible from the beginning. The first book is Patriarchs and Prophets, begins from Genesis. It moves on through the Old Testament with prophets and kings. It comes to the most beautiful biography of Jesus Christ, called The Desire of the Ages. It continues with the Christianity in the first century, called the Acts of the Apostles, and it ends with a great controversy. It follows the Bible from the beginning to the end. The best reading after the Bible. If you want to make someone happy, if you want to give a gift to someone, give one of the books or the whole books. If you have never read them, make a decision today, before you leave this place, to start reading them. And then the Bible continues, Matthew 25, verse 34. Then the king will say to those on his right hand, "Come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world." So when you think of this, what was God's plan in the beginning? Well, God planned in the beginning that we will be with Him in heaven and will be happy there with Him forever and ever and ever. That was in His mind. That was the plan. That was the original design. Who changed the plan? Satan, by deceiving Adam and Eve, changed that design. And we are where we are. And then it continues, "For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger and you took me in. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me." Very interesting. You know, these people in this parable, they are not the virgins. The virgins, they are called to keep the light up in the darkness. They were probably the closest to the second coming. Then you have the servants. The servants were not the virgins. The servants were given talents. They have different talents. They have different responsibilities. And then you have the sheep and the goats. So in a sense, apparently the sheep and the goats are at the extreme of this relationship or closeness to the king or to the bridegroom. They are not that privileged. But they, on the other hand, are welcome in the kingdom of heaven based on very simple principles. And the principle is doing good. Doing something good. Now, when Jesus speaks about this and he says, "I was hungry and you gave me food, I was thirsty," probably, first of all, Jesus had in mind that very shortly, in a very short time, what year was Jesus crucified? Can anybody tell me? 31? Jesus was, how old was Jesus? 33. The year of crucifixion was 31. Do you remember the year of first Christian martyr? Anybody? I'll give you a pen. Anybody? Who said 34? You got it. I have a pen for you. Mika, can you do me a favor, please? I'm sorry to wake you up. No. But it's okay, Mika. I understand. Can you do me a favor to take this pen and give it to a man there, right in the back? Right there in the back, Mika. That gentleman said, that brother said, the year 34. How many years is between 31 to 34? 3. In just 3 years, the persecution against Christians began. In just 3 years from Christ's crucifixion. What's the name of the first Christian martyr? Stephen. Year 34. Do you know what happened immediately after that? Well, what happened immediately after that was Acts chapter 8, verse 1 to 3. Now Saul was consenting to his death, meaning Stephen. At that time, a great persecution arose against the church which was at Jerusalem. And they were all scattered through the regions of Judea and Samaria, except the apostles. And devout men carried Stephen to his burial and made a great lamentation over him. Stephen was a wonderful man, a good man. He was probably a younger man, we don't know, but he was the first, very courageous. He presented the biblical evidence for Jesus Christ. And as for Saul, he made havoc for the church, entering every house and dragging off men and women, committing them to prison. Christian persecutions begins in the year 34. These people are taken to prison. They lose homes. Their homes are properties taken off. One of the greatest dilemma of people getting out of prison, do you know what it is? Especially for those who have been in prison a long time. There is no place to go. One of the greatest, I worked a little bit with prison ministry. One of the greatest dilemmas for people coming out of prison is there is no place for them to go. Many times no family, no jobs, no property, no nothing. For that purpose, some of them choose to go back. Go back in prison because there is no other place for them to go. So the Christians will get out of the jail, and many of them, no home, no job, no nothing. Where would they go? They will go to their brothers and sisters in Christ, which will open up the homes and the doors for them. And they will say, you are my brother and you are my sister. Come, live with me. You're my brother, you are my sister. You come and work with me. I'll give you what you need until you get back on your feet. So Jesus, Jesus looking in the future knew that, and he told them. He speaks in that way, but he's not limited to that. And by the way, historically, that happened a number of times. So the Christians living in the valleys of the Alps, at one point their homes were destroyed, their cities were burned, and I've read about some of them crossing the Alps in the middle of the winter with nothing. And those who survived, they crossed the Alps in Switzerland, and Geneva was one of the cities that became Protestants right at the beginning of Reformation. And they I read a description, beautiful description of these people in very poor clothing, many of them hungry, tired and frozen. And the Christians in Geneva opened up the doors and they took them in as their brothers and sisters, as their children, and shared everything with them. So it was not only for the first Christians, but along the way many, many times. I have known also back home in Romania, some of the people, especially during the communism, some of the people were choosing to become Seventh-day Adventists. In a very strong Eastern Orthodox culture, when someone became a Seventh-day Adventist, they had a lot to lose. And some of them were repudiated by their families. And some of our people would welcome them and said, well, we know what happened to you, come and stay with us. And they will stay for a month or 2 or 3 until the family will accept them back. And Jesus, looking in time, he is using the illustration and the parable of the sheep and the goats. One passage written by Ellen White, practical Christianity, we must have or we cannot enter in heaven. Hearing and preaching the gospel is not enough. We must wear the yoke of Christ. We must learn of him to be meek and lowly. We must be doers of the word. If you know these things, Christ declares, happy are you if you do them. You see, one of my greatest concerns about my own life, about my own Christianity, is that we become very theoretical, speaking a lot, talking a lot. We come to meetings and board meetings and all kinds of, which there is a place for administration, no question on that. In the end of time, Jesus is not going to ask me or you, how many board meetings did you attend and how many sermons did you preach? That's not going to be the question. The question is going to be how much good you did. Does anybody remember you by doing anything good for them? Anything of significance for someone? Practical Christianity. There is a passage I love. God calls not only for your benevolence, meaning money or shoes or material values, but for your cheerful countenance, your hopeful words, the grasp of your hand. When the last question was asked for the students that have been in Africa, why don't you, and I to be honest, I thought of that, why don't send money? Send the money and people will use the money. And I thought, well, there is one thing that's, I believe, very significant, what you gave to those children will never be bought with money. The kindness, the love, the joy for those days, the impact that you had they will always remember. You may forget their names, you may or may not. They will never forget yours. They will always remember you. And so, as you visit the Lord's afflicted ones, you'll find some from whom hope has departed. Bring back the sunshine to them. There are those who need the bread of life. Read to them from the Word of God. Upon others, there is a soul sickness that no earthly balm can reach or physician can heal. Pray for this and bring them to Jesus. Then I have to say that sometime I have the privilege of interacting with people. People are the material I'm working with. And sometimes you are in situations where there is nothing else you can give to someone. I mean, what they can be in such a situation, there is nothing you can give them. Either if you like to give or if you try to give, the only thing that you can give to them is to lead them to God and to present to them the hope in Jesus Christ is the ultimate hope of life. There is nothing else you can do for them. And I like this passage again. Some of us say, I may not have material goods to give, but every one of us can say a good word to someone. Everybody can pray with someone or say something and at least smile to someone. Do something good for someone. It can be the cashier at Walmart or someone in a Home Depot or whatever, or a neighbor. We can do a lot of good, and it doesn't have to be material values only. And talking about, I'm sorry. Many of us want to do good, and sometimes we end up in some confusing situations. Have you been in situations where you think, shall I help or shall I not? Shall I give or shall I not? Is this the right thing to do, or am I endorsing laziness? And you ask those questions in your mind because I believe everybody that's in this room has a good heart. I believe that. I mean, that's not a question in my mind. But sometimes you get confused, and in the book it's called Counsels for the Church. I don't know if you have seen this book or if you've read the book. I would recommend this book. It's a compilation on different topics and subjects from marriage, from choosing to get into marriage, and all kinds of spiritual topics. Counsels for the Church. It's a combination of multiple topics. And in the book, there is a chapter called The Christian Attitude Towards the Want and Suffering. And I just condensed some of the ideas. I read this again yesterday, and I said, let me put this there just to have an understanding. So, in the chapter it says, poor people become poor because of three main reasons. Some of them poor by choice. Go to this nice place, half mile on the right side as you go down Pine Casino. Have you heard of that? What's the name? Twin Pines. I'm sorry, I don't go there too often. I go there for gas. So, but I'm amazed that sometimes I got there just to use the restroom, and I see people there, and I just look at them a little bit, and they are there. They spend their time there. They spend their life there. They spend money there. And I've heard stories about people going and actually losing their homes because they spend all the money at a casino. Some people get poor because of poor choices. Other people get poor because of truth. People lost jobs, hard to get back into work in different countries. Maybe not so much in the United States, but there have been places in the world where, because of the truth, people have to pay a price. Others because of unfortunate circumstances. We visited with the Whistles, as I think you call them. I don't really like that kind of a way of saying. The Poenarus. But, and they told me the story how their house burned. And maybe others, maybe other people, I mean, you lose your home, you lose your shop, you lose your truck, you lose everything, and you wake up next morning and say, which way I'm going? I mean, where do I start? Unfortunate circumstance. Someone can get sick, and you spend all your savings in going from one hospital to another, from one doctor to another. So there are reasons people becoming poor because of unfortunate life circumstances. Remember Job, right? You remember Job, lost everything. And we have to make the difference. When you think of people and helping people, you try to use discernment. So help everyone with discernment, beginning at home, meaning begin with the people you know, begin with the people that are closest to you. Don't endorse idleness. These are ideas from the chapter. And I found this interesting statement. No man who can earn his own livelihood has a right to depend on others. That's an interesting statement. I take it as being true. We don't have to endorse laziness. Some need advice and direction. Some people need advice and direction in the way they manage life. And actually I read somewhere where it says, if someone is not willing to receive advice and guidance, let them do whatever they choose. Every church should have a worthy poor fund. I think we have one in our church where you are ready to help someone in need. Appoint a team to make recommendations. You choose godly people, and their mission would be to look after those who are in need, both in the church and outside the church. But everything should be done with discretion. Doing good is part of the mission, but not the whole mission. So I found these ideas as some guidelines for how to, because I think I was sometime in this dilemma. Shall I help someone? What shall I do? You see plenty of people hungry. I'm hungry. I need food. I need money and this and that. So sometimes you go through this ethical question. Am I going to help? Am I not? Am I doing a good thing or am I doing a bad thing? So these are some of the guidelines. But then Jesus continues in his parable. Then the righteous will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you a drink? When did we see you a stranger and take you in, or naked and clothe you? Or when did we see you sick or in prison and come to you? Can you imagine the time when Jesus Christ comes in his glory with his millions and millions and angels, and the sky is bright, and some people will be taken to heaven and they will say, I didn't expect this. And Jesus will say to them, you're welcome, you're welcome. You did this and this and this for me. And they say, when did I do that? I don't remember doing this. I've never seen you do it in a need. So when did we do that? So I was thinking of a story, and I remember myself being in Africa a number of years ago with a project in Tanzania for 3 months. And I'm going to use this as an illustration. I remember the project was away from the closest city, like probably an hour driving. Anyway, it was 2 hours driving, riding a bike on the dirt road. So I was away from my family. Alina and our son Nathan, they were in Norway at that time, and I wanted to keep in touch with them. So the only way to do that, I was supposed to go in town by bike on dirt roads in Africa with no signs. I mean, there was no signs. Go left or right. Just the dirt roads all over the place. And I remember one Friday, I got a bike and I started biking 2 hours towards this place where I could access the email from someone that had internet. And then I did some shopping, gone to the market and bought some. Did you eat good fruits in Africa? Were they good? Yeah, and I remember going to the market, I bought some fruits and put them in my backpack, and I'm ready to go back home to the mission project. The mission project is called Kibidula. And as I was getting out of the market, I met someone, began to start talking to someone, and he said, well, where are you going? And, you couldn't find too many white people there at that time, so being a white person caught the attention. And someone said, I said, I'm going to Kibidula. I says, there is a shortcut. And there's a shortcut. And it says, shortcut. Oh, yeah, well, the sundown is coming, and I better be at the mission before before it's dark. And he said, you go this, and you go right, and take left and turn right, and you come to that point, and get intersection, and you this and that, and that's going to be the shortcut, and you end up in your road again. I said, well, let me try. So, and that's what I did. I tried to follow his directions, and hey, guess what? Well, I kind of got lost. But anyway, I found myself on this road going from, a little bit of a jungle, a little village, a little bit of a jungle, another village, and I'm biking through one of the villages, and the kids, did they speak Swahili in Kenya? Swahili is one of the languages. It's probably the main language of Africa. And we've learned a little bit of Swahili. We were there. Anyway, so as I'm biking and going in one direction, a little boy, is not this boy. I have my pictures of Africa and some of my archives, and I didn't have the time to look for. A little boy looks at me as I'm biking, and he waves at me, and he starts shaking his hand, and he begins to speak to me in Swahili. And he shows me in the opposite direction. And I'm thinking, I didn't understand what he was saying, but he was talking to me. And he's pointing in the opposite direction. What do you think he was doing? He was showing me that I was going the wrong way. And I didn't know. But then I stopped and thought, I said, maybe he's telling me that I'm going the wrong way. And I turned around, and and he does the same thing. And the little kid, as young as he was, probably he was not older than 7 or 8 years old, in his mind, with his very simple mind, he did the math, and he said, this white guy, they called him the Wazungu, and they said, this white guy, he can't go in any other place other than the mission place, and he's going the wrong way. Let me tell him to go back and turn around and go back because he's going the wrong way. So the little kid cared enough to think of me and had the eyes to see me going in the wrong way, and had the intuition to start talking to me in Swahili and to tell me to go back on the right way. And he was right. I was going the wrong way. And then I turned back and came to an intersection and found my way back home. So I was wondering, and as you see, I still remember the experience. How much theology did he know? How much to care about me or to think of me? Not at all. Not at all. He just had the common sense and probably this natural love to human beings where he cared enough to tell me that I was going in the wrong way. And there is a song, some of you might know the song. I've learned the song from the American pastor that came to Romania with a mission project. And he would play piano beautifully and sing the song in the same time. If I can help somebody as I pass along, if I can cheer somebody with a word or a song, if I can show somebody when they are traveling wrong, then my living shall not be in vain. And the chorus is, then my living shall not be in vain, then my living shall not be in vain. If I can help somebody as I pass along, then my living shall not be in vain. Some of us may not know the theology, all the theology of the Bible. You might not be able to explain each doctrine very well or some deep prophetical concepts. But we all could help somebody. We all can do that. If a little African child was able to look at me and make the math in his mind and to see me going the wrong way and to tell me that, to help me turn around and go, we all can help somebody. And in the end, Jesus, the King, will answer and say to them, surely I say to you, inasmuch as you did this to one of the least my brethren, you did it to me. It's very interesting. If the Bible is true, and I take it as being true, you see, the Bible and God, it seems that God relates in a very personal way to human beings. We are here as a group. We do things in groups. I preach to a group of people. We do lots of things, as a group. But finally, the Bible and the relationship with God becomes very personal. And that's what actually matters the most. What matters the most is, how do I live my life as an individual? Am I having even a minimal impact on someone's life? What do I do with my life? You might not be one of the virgins called to hold up the light. You might not be even one of the most talented persons in the world. But anybody can be a follower of Christ. And he calls them my sheep, right? He calls them my sheep. Anybody can follow Christ and be one of his sheep and do good. We all can do good. The parable ends being ready for the second coming of Jesus. Actually can be summarized in this parable from that perspective, doing good to as many as we can at all times and in all places. That's the conclusion of the parable. Jesus ends the parable with the exact opposite. When he tells the goats, he tells to the ones who are on the left, he said, no, you didn't do it. And they say, well, you know what the parable says. When did we see you? And Jesus says, when you never saw me, but every time when you've been ignorant or neglecting those in need, you actually neglected me. We end today the series of parables of the end time with the last of them, which is the parable of the sheep and the goats. Jesus says, I know my sheep, they will follow me. And as Jesus did good to very many people all the time and in all places where he was, the same way it should be with me, and the same it should be with you. So Jesus was very practical. So if we, at the end of this sermon, probably we should ask ourselves a question. Can you guess what the question would be? The question is, what shall I do this afternoon? What good am I going to do this afternoon? That's the question after the sermon. That's the application of the sermon. Just hearing, feeling good about it, or whatever, doesn't count. The practical Christianity is what matters. And the question for today is, what good am I going to do this afternoon? What good am I going to do tomorrow? And you don't have to be a theologian, a preacher, or a church elder, or anything else. Anybody can do a little good to someone. So I will invite you, before you leave this place, take a little bit of time and think about it. You may know someone who's lonely and sick. You may know someone that has never been in church in 5 years. You may know a neighbor who's lonely. You may know someone. Or if not, pray that the Lord will guide you to someone. Let's be a blessing to someone and reveal the kindness and the love of God to someone today. Amen. The closing song, Michael, Would you lead us in the closing hymn today? It's the same one, which I love it, 577, verses 3 and 4. We invite you to stand and sing the